Hi everyone and welcome to this webinar. Our speaker today is Giovanni Colavizza. Giovanni works as Assistant Professor of Digital Humanities at the University of Amsterdam, and today he's going to talk about the project he worked on during his residency at the National Library of the Netherlands, in which he investigated the impact of OCR quality on downstream tasks. If you have any questions during or after the presentation, you can press the circle with the question mark in it, and you can type your question in there, and Giovanni will answer the questions after his presentation. So welcome, Giovanni, and please start when you're ready.
Thank you, Miriam. Thank you very much, and thank you. Oops, it was not okay. I hope you see my my slide now. And thank you very much to all of you that came online today to hear this talk. And also, indeed, thank you for the National Library, because it has supported this work throughout residency that I took there last year in 2020. And work that I'm presenting today on the quality of OCR and whether it is good enough, and indeed for what, has been also a collaboration with Miriam that you have just heard from, and great help, and with Konstantin Todorov, also at the University of Amsterdam, part of my team. And you have also in the title a bit of a spoiler, right? Because that's a long story short. If there is one thing that you take from this presentation, is that the answer to that question is probably yes. But if you want to know more, then stay with me. So let me start with briefly introducing the topic for those of you that are maybe less familiar with it. What it is, OCR, or also HCR, sometimes called, for two different tasks. It's optical or handwritten character recognition. And it's a task in machine learning that deals with the conversion of text that is contained into images. So it can be typed, optical, character recognition, or handwritten. And conversion into machine readable text. Now, OCR or HCR is extremely important and extremely widely used because of the abundance of images containing texts that we would like to turn into machine readable text. So it's very useful and it's widely adopted. On the other hand, it is also error prone, like pretty much any task in machine learning, in the sense that a variety of situations can come in and generate errors in the OCR. And some of them are listed there. It can be the source that is of bad quality. Think about perhaps an old newspaper on cheap paper, printed on cheap paper. The quality of the image, maybe captured with old cameras or the like. The quality of the OCR system, which indeed improves going over in time with new research, and also challenges that are intrinsic to the text. For example, the use of multiple languages or linguistic variation over time. So for all these reasons, then we have errors, more or less, more or fewer of them when we do OCR. Typical examples that might be familiar to some of you are the ones that you see here. So I've taken out the first part of the sentence of the second paragraph of this picture, and I have come up with some examples of typical errors. You have, for example, a long S, which is infamous in OCR. It's difficult to get right. Or you have ligatures or other problems, also low resolution of this image. So we would like to have the thing on the left, but often we come up with the thing on the right. Then the question is, well, what happens when we have the thing on the right instead of the thing on the left? And in particular, when we consider use of OCR, right? So we have an OCR and we start using it in a variety of ways. For example, we might use it for search engines, such as to do search and information retrieval. We might use it to do information extraction, name entity recognition, for example. It's an important task. And we might use people like me and researchers in digital humanities in particular they like to do text mining and analysis on these corpora. So while we know quite a bit about how to assess the quality of the OCR in terms of the discrepancy between those two versions that you see above, we know much less about the impact of non-perfect or dirty OCR in these so-called downstream tasks, right? So things that we do afterwards, automated usually, that make use of an OCR text. So the impact of OCR quality on those tasks is a known unknown, in the sense that we know that we don't know much about it. Still, of course, the picture is not so bleak, also because researchers have been working on the topic as of late. I'm showing you here results from a couple of recent papers that have done exactly in this direction, so assessing the impact of OCR quality on downstream tasks. And you see three different tasks here depicted. It's always the case that the x-axis gives you an indication of the quality of the OCR. From the left, bad, to the right, better. And the y-axis gives you an indication of the performance that we achieve on a certain task using OCR text. From the bottom, low, to the top, good results. And we can appreciate that indeed the OCR quality has an impact. On the left, you see results for authorship attribution. On the right top, dependency parsing, right bottom, name entity recognition. In all these cases, there is an impact. It is though quite diverse. For example, on the left, we can see that up to 75 F1 score, it basically doesn't matter, right? So you get the same results for this task, and then the quality rapidly degenerates. And you have different patterns on the right. So there is something in there, and there is indeed an impact, but still there is much to be done in order to properly understand it and quantify it. This is where my work has been located, and in particular, given the National Library sponsorship, I focused on Dutch and on their collection, so data coming from the library and in Dutch. And in terms of the tasks that I focused on, I had really three goals in mind, plus kind of bonus task. The first is document classification, then document clustering. I'll tell you a bit more about what they are in a moment. And the third task is neural language modeling, which is about modeling the language that is contained in these documents. And then the bonus task is post-OCR correction. I say bonus because that's really not a downstream task. That's kind of upstream, if you like, task. So we have an OCR and we would like to improve its quality. So it is related, but not to assess the impact of OCR quality. And I will be presenting results of work in progress, so they might still get updated for the first, the second, and the fourth task today. Okay, so what is the methodology that we use in order to assess the impact of on these downstream tasks? It's called extrinsic evaluation. It's a form of extrinsic evaluation, which is a family of methods. There are different approaches in there. But in a nutshell, this is the idea. We have two versions of the same corpus. Let's say we have a collection of documents, and we have two versions of the same document. One we call the ground truth, and we know that it's very high quality, ideally perfect. And that has been usually manually typed and then corrected by human experts. And then we have the OCR version. So the OCR version, of course, we can have multiple ones coming from a digitization campaign and given a certain OCR software. So what's the idea of extrinsic evaluation? Well, what we do is that we perform the same task using the two versions of the same corpus. And we use the results on this task from the ground truth as the ideal that we want to approximate. And then we measure how worse or how differently we're doing using the OCR version of the same corpus. And I put a completely fictional example down there. So I have classification and clustering task. I'm using a certain measure to assess what is the quality of how well I'm doing at my task. And I'm imagining that I get 95% accuracy for classification and 91% for clustering. And then on the for ground truth version, and then for the OCR version, I'm imagining that I get, let's say, 94.5% accuracy for classification and 78% for clustering. Therefore, this extrinsic evaluation would lead me to say, well, classification is okay, basically. I roughly get the same results, minus a very minor decrease in performance. Instead, clustering is performing much worse. So there is an issue there, okay? Extrinsic evaluation is very good to assess what we want. It is also very costly because, as you can imagine, we need these two versions of each corpus, and especially the ground truth is costly and hard to collect. But luckily enough, I could rely on previous work, in large part from the library, that put at my disposal a variety of data sets. For the results that I'm going to present today, I've used these three. So the first two are actually coming from the library. For classification task, I'm going to use a collection of books from DBNL with labels provided, well, harvested through their API about the genre of a certain book. And for clustering, instead, I'm going to use historical newspapers, also coming from the library. And there is a mistake there. So it's 220 books for the first data set and roughly 2,000 pages for the second one. Apologies for the swap. And thirdly, for post-OCR correction, instead, I'm going to use a published data set. Well, all these are published, but an external data set, not from the library, released as part of a shared task in post-OCR correction from the ICDAR 2019 challenge. I should say, by the way, I forgot to mention that I hope you have linked to these slides in the chat, so you can, if you like, follow on these links and all the links that come afterwards. And before going into each task, I've also applied for the results that I'm presenting today a rather aggressive pre-processing pipeline. Depends a bit on the task, but it could include some of the steps that you see there. Of course, pre-processing helps a lot for certain tasks to mitigate OCR errors, and indeed for other tasks it is not possible to use it. So it's an important disclaimer as well, a limitation, if you like, of this study. Okay, and before going into results, the last bit is, well, what actually is the OCR quality of, again, two versions of the same corpora that I'm going to use. So on the left, BNL books for classification, and on the right, the newspaper pages for clustering. And you can see in red the OCR quality, and in blue the ground truth. And you might ask, but why is the ground truth also not perfect? Well, the idea is that here we are using a method for assessing the quality, which is called dictionary lookup, and it allows to have an idea of the quality of the text based on looking up a historical dictionary that should contain the words that are used in those texts. And the more matches you have there, of course, the better we could say that the quality is. Nevertheless, this method has limitations, of course, because of the limitation of the dictionary, and because there are all sort of inflections in the use of words that we might not capture. The advantage of this method, and the reason why we use it, is that it can be used without a ground truth, because the other way to assess the quality of the OCR is, again, extrinsic. So to take the ground truth as the reference and measure the distance of the OCR version from that reference. And indeed, in the repository that is linked down there, you can find also these kind of assessments, if you like. So we have a worse corpus, let's say. So the books is a bit worse, is a bit more varied in OCR quality. Instead, newspapers it looks a bit better, but you can also clearly see that there is a difference. There is a shift between ground truth and OCR. Okay, so task number 1, classification. As a quick reminder, classification is a so-called supervised task in machine learning, whose goal is to, given a data set of documents with labels or classes, we want to train a classifier that is able to give a new document that previously unseen, assign to them the right class. So a bit like what you see in the picture. And jumping immediately to results, what I've done is to throw at it a battery of methods, from very simple ones to a bit more complex ones. So I won't go into the details. I mean, it's a bit beyond the scope here. But these are, I would say, reasonable methods, also given the size of the dataset, which is not that large, right? So we need to be mindful of that. Already, some of these methods might be a bit overkill for that amount of data, but be it as it may, something emerges pretty clearly, which I found quite interesting. What you see on the right column is the accuracy on the 2 versions, ground truth and OCR, as calculated on a held out test dataset that wasn't used for training, of course. And what it emerges is that the OCR quality is pretty comparable, but interestingly enough, even better sometimes. Actually, the best result is achieved with an LSTM neural network classifier that beats every other method on the OCR text. Right? So not only the OCR version seem to be absolutely fine for this task, to be used for this task, but sometimes it can even be better. And intuitively, the reason might be that OCR noise, the removal of OCR noise via preprocessing, for example, might underline, might put more emphasis on some features that are of interest for the classification task. So it does not need to be worse, it can even be better. Second task, document clustering, and I've used here topic modeling. So document clustering in general, the idea is similar. So we want to group documents into bins, but we don't have any label to train a classifier for. So we can only rely on the similarity among documents. So this is a bit the depiction of the task. And I've used here a very widely used method, which is called topic modeling. Again, with the idea not of using too fancy methods, but to use methods that are widely adopted, for example, in the digital humanities community. And as a quick reminder, what topic modeling does is that it creates those topics, and you can see illustrated on the left here, which are different probability distributions over vocabulary given a certain corpus, that try to map how words are used together in the documents. So you can see, for example, there something about genetics, DNA, etc., or something about data, numbers, computers, etc., different topics, topic distributions. And then each document gets a topic distribution. Each topic is a word distribution. Each document is a topic distribution. So a document might be more about genetics and brain and cognitive science. Another topic might be more about computer science, data, and numbers, for example. That's the idea. And the way to assess it, now here it's a bit more complicated because we don't have labels, we don't have ground truth for the task. So what I've done is to train 2 parallel LDA topic modeling methods on the OCR version and the ground truth, and then match the topics. So try to find what is the closest topic across the 2 distributions, and then assess how similar they are. And a method to do that is assessing how similar they are, the top words, so the most important words that define each topic on each side. You can see an example of that on the bottom left, where I have put the top words for 2 matching topics. On the top, the ground truth, and on the bottom, the OCR. I think this is about the First World War. And you can see that, I mean, the words are sometimes similar, sometimes different. The weights might be different, but the topics look pretty similar. And this is also more macroscopically what we see on the right. That's a distribution of the words in common among the paired topics using the procedure that I've just described, which is relatively high, right? So it's 0.6, 0.7, or 60 to 70% overlap on average, which I would say is quite good. And then looking at the time quickly, so I should accelerate. Well, I'll just very quickly mention about post-OCR correction, that the goal here is to go back, right? So we have the thing on the right and we want to have the thing on the left. So correct the OCR. I'll spare you the methodology, but this is published research if you would like to look it up. That's the paper at the bottom. And the results that we get, again, specifically for Dutch, using definitely fancier methods than what I've used for the other tasks, is that we can improve on average the OCR quality between 10 and 17%, depending on how you measure it. So not only it seems that it's fine to work with OCR texts, at least so far, what I could see, but also that we can keep improving oftentimes using these more advanced methods on the quality that we get on the OCR. Okay, so in conclusion, yeah, basically what I've just said, so the quite encouraging results, I would say, both for topic modeling and document classification, given all the limitations, right? So small data sets and specific methodology, but encouraging results. Sometimes the OCR quality, the OCR version can even be better than a ground truth. And there might be often margin for improvement given a certain OCR corpus to ameliorate it using post-OCR correction. And this again confirms previous work that I've started from in saying that what we see is that oftentimes the quality of the OCR that is out there, except in very bad situations, is definitely good enough for a variety of machine learning techniques and tasks. Future work that I'm doing is mostly now focused on neural language models, so the bit that I haven't shown today. And also I think it's going to be important to have a better assessment with shared data sets and larger data sets to really find those breaking points, right? So when can we say it's okay, and when can we say, well, we should really go back and improve on the OCR? But I also would say that future work, maybe this is a parting thought, that I would say we should start feel more encouraged and encourage other people to use the OCR that we have, because it really seems to be quite okay for a variety of things. So we will never get perfect texts using OCR, but we can still do a lot with them. So so why wait? And to conclude, hopefully somewhat on time, you can find all the data online and all the code in this repository, as well as the code specifically for post-OCR correction in another repository, and for that there is already a published paper. If there is anything that you would like to contribute or comment on, please do that via GitHub or send me a message as well. And I also would like to mention that there are 2 blog posts on the National Library website. One that I have written at the beginning of the project, and one at the end, so that, well, that at the end is largely conveying the results that I've just discussed, so that you have also written reference. And this work is also under review for the DH Benelux, so maybe we will get a chance to expand upon it there. And with that, I think I'll take any question you might have.
Thank you, Giovanni. I think it's very interesting to see that a lower OCR quality isn't always a problem. That's good to hear. And it's also nice to see that there's a room for improving. I don't see any questions in the chat yet, but I have a few questions for you if you don't mind. So I was wondering, in your presentation, you said that you performed 3 downstream tasks. And I was wondering, what is the reasoning behind those tasks? Why did you choose them instead of others?
Yeah, good point. So it's a bit of a combination of their popularity. So how important they are in the community. For example, topic modeling is really widely used because it allows to start making sense of a corpus when there is no other or little information to use for that reason. So there are some tasks that it's important to get some results on, also for different languages and not just the usually used ones like English or French. And the second motivation for choice of tasks is that of new tasks that people haven't really worked much on. Classification is not surprisingly, because it's a quite straightforward task. It's not very used, or sometimes it is adopted in the previous literature, but in particular neural language modeling, I think that it's still wide open. So we're getting very interesting results there. So I think that's going to be hopefully useful.
Okay, well, thank you. I see some messages in the chat coming. So let's see. The first one is: can you say anything about the time period that the results apply to? Is it only modern Dutch, or does it also apply on 17th century printed texts?
Yeah, I think that's really a question to you, Mira, because you're more the expert on these data sets.
Well, I'm not sure for the books, but I know in the newspaper pages you used that there were a few pages from the 17th century, but it was just a small amount. Most of them were from the 20th century. And for the books, I'm not really sure. So I don't have that answer.
So from all this information is online in the repository, so that you can look up. There are also more data sets in there that I haven't discussed results from them, but indeed it's as you say, these results are mostly for 19th and early 20th century with a few documents backtracking. But we do have more data also backwards, which is also worse in terms of OCR quality, that we haven't yet explored. So that could be a nice extension.
And another question: thank you for your presentation. Nice research. What about the use of intelligent and proven libraries of words, variants, and typos, like are used in search methods?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Is it a suggestion or?
I'm not sure. It's from Michiel Goosen, so maybe he can add a little more context to his question. And then we move on to the next and we see if he says something more about it.
Okay, maybe let's do that. Sorry about that. I'm not fully sure I understand.
If you can extend your question a little bit more, that would be nice. Another one: thank you for your interesting presentation. Do you have any recommendations for the KB on their data sets, for example, to facilitate researchers better and or to improve data quality?
Yeah, well, I would say that maybe I think, to be honest, I think the data is often very good. I mean, we could always work on that, but I see as a bit more pressing the need for communicating about that. So I think that so communicating and making people and users and researchers comfortable about using it, even though it's not perfect. And maybe an idea there could be that for each a big release, right, there is a new digitization campaign, etc. There can be a self-contained, manageable in time and effort and cost assessment along the lines of the techniques that are presented or other techniques. And then the release of a new dataset can be accompanied by that study, just to make people aware and comfortable that, you know, it should be fine for at least many things, if not all of that. I see that as more priority than improving the quality, even though, I mean, for that, yeah, there is a lot. I'm not able to speak about the balance between improving the quality and digitizing more, right? Making more things available, because it's a trade-off in terms of, I guess, the costs. And for what I can see, the quality is often good. So maybe broadening coverage is also important there.
So more instead of better.
Yeah, but I mean, it's my perspective. So.
Okay. Another question. Thank you very much for your talk. In your presentation, you talked about Dutch. I wonder if there is similar results in the other languages.
Yeah, there is definitely some for I think definitely for English, the two papers that I've mentioned at the beginning. There might be some more for French and German, and I think my recommendation, now on the top of my head, I don't remember, but my recommendation would be to follow the citation links of those two papers, inbound and outgoing. There isn't much, so you should be able to find there. And if you have a specific language that you don't have any results for, there is quite more code than data on these and results on these. So feel very much free to just fork these repositories and add results for that language.
I see a question from Alessandra de Mulder, but it's cut off at the end, so I don't know if there's more coming, but what I can see is, will the results be similar for other languages? Oh, that's the same question, I think, as before, so we can skip that. And Alessandra, I see your message only in half, so if there's another important thing, maybe you can type it again. Then the other one, hi Giovanni, thank you for your presentation and very clear and informative as usual. How did you select the samples for the comparison?
Yeah, good question. Well, thank you for the compliment, first of all. I think the selection was, to be very honest, was also based on what was there already, right? So on previous work from the library that has prepared a set of data sets that contain these two versions, right? The ground truth and OCR version for a variety of corpora and for different projects. So we didn't do any new work on that, but we tried to reuse what was available already. And of course, that's you know, those are relatively small samples, but also they are quite varied, and there is more, by the way, than what I have presented today that you can find in the repository. So we felt like that was a good start. So what was there already? It's very costly to prepare them, so it's kind of a necessity in this case.
And another question, I have a lot more coming, so be prepared. From your experience, do you know of other specific tasks where low quality OCR would be a problem?
Good question. Yeah, I can think about well, roughly speaking, that the more you focus on a smaller linguistic units, the more problematic it's going to be. For example, what I've done, what I presented today is, if you like, the easiest level, because it's the whole document, right? Excluding post-OCR correction, but that's a bit a tangent. So when we work at the level of the whole document, we don't really need to have all the information in the document. Often we can work and do well also with part of that information. That might go a long way in explaining why we still have good results, or even better results sometimes for the OCR version. But then when you go at lower linguistic levels, for example, you work on words or tokens, then it becomes more complicated, right? Because errors there have a way to impact your results much more. So when you do, for example, name entity recognition or dependency parsing, these tasks work at a word level or sentence level. And I think those are going to be more impacted by low OCR quality. Or you could have good results in some areas that have good OCR, bad results elsewhere. So we should be more careful there.
Okay, another question. How important is it to share the estimated quality of the existing OCR for researchers? Is there a threshold that needs to be reached for the quality for research?
Yeah, very good question. I think that's very open still. Because the threshold, I think, is situational to what you want to do with this corpora. And what I would suggest for the future, maybe hinting at the library, is that if there are some services, and thinking in particular about search, keyword search and document ranking for information retrieval, which is kind of a basic thing that you get from library, then maybe assessing the OCR quality for those tasks and reporting on it is something that the library could do, right, to make available for the users. If instead there are more specific needs that depend on given research questions, I think it's probably going to be more situational. So I don't think there is a general answer there. But there are tasks that are more popular than other tasks, right? So on those we can work, report results, and then people can just be aware of them and go on with their tasks.
I have a really interesting question following. Thanks, Giovanni. Really impressed by your work. My question: suppose you're the CEO of the KB. Given your experience with our current OCR, what would you do? Should we improve it, or can we serve researchers such as you in a proper manner?
Well, I'll say that I think I'm very, very satisfied by the support that the library already gives to researchers and the National Library. So so that is something that I should acknowledge and we should cherish. First thing. Second thing is that in particular, the library is very open in sharing data and in making their data available and in supporting researchers. Which I think is definitely the way to go, especially at the moment, because it allows to, really put your hands in the data and do the assessments and the things that you would like to do, and then eventually to provide feedback on them. So I think this is very good, right? So and should be underlined. Yeah, generally, I mean, I don't think I'm fit for the job, but two things that I might consider doing is basically what I mentioned before. So try to do these assessments more systematically and inform users about them, and really build trust in the work that has been done, even though it's not perfect. And that can take different forms. It can be through sponsoring research, like they did with me, or to do internally some evaluation campaigns. To go and improve only when it's really needed, not because as a matter of principle we want to have perfect OCR. We will never have perfect OCR. So before redoing OCR, before spending money in trying to improve, I would make sure that it's really necessary. And then if that is taken care of, expanding coverage, I think would be great.
Okay. Another question: do you already have an idea where the breaking point is approximately?
No, not really. Also because yeah, I mean, I won't put all the slides again, but what I get from the work that I do is much closer to the plots that you maybe I don't know if I'm still sharing this, probably not. Can you still see my screen by any chance?
I only see you and me, so.
Okay, so forget about that. The slide that I had towards the beginning with the previous research and 2 papers that I asked. On the left, we have a plot that clearly points to a breaking point, which is really nice. And I've cheated a little bit because I picked out that plot from the paper because it was so nice and so clear. But the picture that you usually have in other situations is more on what you have on the right. So it really depends. You have a trend, a clear trend, but the breaking point is still difficult to get. I think we should probably do more work on that. Maybe for some tasks we will find breaking point with some confidence intervals. For other tasks, it's going to be a bit more difficult, I think.
Okay. Let's see. Next question. I appreciate that you want to look at this in the future, but any thoughts on what the breaking points levels are likely to be? Well, I think you already answered that. And Lotte Wilms mentioned the DBNL books are in the range from 76 to 78. So,
oh, thank you. Thank you for that.
You also know that. Another question. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. Can you speak a bit more about why you think the OCR performs better? How exactly does the pre-processing make the data set better?
Yeah, I think it boils down. I mean, I would need to run a more in-depth analysis to answer in detail. But my current intuition and what I've seen a bit exploring examples is that the OCR coupled with pre-processing, with rather aggressive pre-processing, basically it clears up the feature space. So you can get the same results or even a bit better results using that, and without losing much, because you still have enough signal to perform your task. So that's my current understanding of it.
Okay, another question is, I think you already answered that. I also wondered about the aggressive pre-processing steps. If I understood correctly, you removed the noisy OCR from the OCR dataset. I wonder how much important information was potentially removed as a result of this step.
Yeah, I think so. This is very important, right? It depends really what you want to achieve. So when we do extrinsic evaluation, we're not. There is really a task that we're trying to crack. So anything that I say is only for that specific task, right? So and if we have classification, then we want to have a label. If we have clustering, then we want to have a somewhat accurate representation for topic modeling of what is of the topics, right? So as similar as possible to the ground truth, and a clustering of the documents. So in that respect, the OCR quality is good enough. I'm not saying that indeed with OCR errors everything is the same. Right? So it's really specific to these downstream tasks. And for classification, it's probably not that important to have all the text in all the details.
Okay.
But for other tasks, it might be different, right? So I fully agree there.
Next question. What would you recommend in case you have OCR that was generated in different ways and have different errors? Improving the corpus with one method does not seem helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. So from the point of view of this kind of analysis, they would be different corpora. So if you have a collection, let's say, that has been digitized and OCR at different points in time, and with better techniques and or whatever or different parts of the collection, you get a better result than other parts of the collection. Then the assessment of the OCR quality for a certain task would need to be performed on each of those subparts of the collection, assuming that there is some uniformity in the let's say data generating process, right? So which is usually the case because these campaigns are done in batches, right? So you have groups of documents that are digitized and OCR as an aggregate, and that gives some kind of stability on the technology that is used, and therefore also it maps to a kind of stability on the OCR quality. Of course, if modular variations in the contents. So any uniformly processed and also in terms of content batch should be a different corpus in terms of the assessment, ideally.
Okay, a message from Alessandra, who had a couple of messages before. She said, I just said, thank you for the interesting presentation, very clear. So that's a compliment. Next question. You mentioned a task for the DBNL books, namely trying and classifying the genre. Could you tell us more about the results on this task? The pace of presenting was quite high, so I might have missed it.
Okay. Sorry about that, about the pace, but so in the slides, you can find a link to the API, DBNN API that I've used. I've really just gotten the metadata from there. So this is, I believe, classification done by librarians, by experts. And the results in a nutshell is that for classification of that corpus and for that classification task, results on ground truth and OCR are very similar, and for some models it's even better to use OCR text than ground truth, meaning that it should be fine to do classification with that quality of the OCR, which, as we have seen in a slide, is not very good, right, on average. So it's very skewed, very uneven, more than skewed, but the quality of that OCR is very varied, let's say. So I think this result is, I think, interesting.
Okay, how can we standardize an assessment process across CLEM organizations?
Great question.
So if you're a CAO of the KB, how would you do that?
Yeah, no. So this is a really great question, and well, I mean, there are many ideas there, and in part is also something that I'd like to turn into research project at some point. But many things I would help in that direction. I think the standard way to report, to assess and report on the OCR quality and of its impact for certain tasks that could be shared across organizations would be very helpful when releasing data or making a certain service available. The second thing that I think would be extremely helpful is to give researchers and people interested into performing these kind of assessments, or even in performing tasks on collections, some sort of programmatic access to the collection, so that, say, the library or another institution, they can get the help or the support or the collaboration from researchers on these tasks much more fluently and much more with a system that supports that, and that could be shared across organizations. It would be really great, right? Because we try to make everything open, but in the end we have different repositories, different data sets, etc. It's always complicated to collect everything. If that is standardized and made available to a platform, that would be great, and make this kind of assessments much easier.
It would be really cool indeed. I have the last question for you. How much
Sure.
are these models language dependent? Could these tasks be done on multilingual corpus?
Yeah, absolutely. So absolutely. So well, depends what kind of information do you have. If you have a list, some let's say documents that are in different languages, or if the same document could contain multiple languages. So those are a bit different situations, and of course also whether you have information about it. Right? So do you know which language is used in every document? If not, we can always classify them. Of course, there are methods to get that information out. So it's definitely possible, and also the more advanced machine learning techniques that I haven't used for this study in particular, because the data is so small, allow us more easily to work in a multilingual setting. And this is also something that we are exploring for neural language models, indeed. So it's possible. It's a little bit more complicated though.
There's one last question coming in. Could a focus on layout analysis help to improve the quality of the OCR? In other words, if you have more knowledge of whether something is a letter and a specific piece of text is a signature or the name of the addressee, would it be something that could help improve the OCR too?
Yeah, it's possible. It's possible, absolutely. I think work on layout analysis, which I don't do directly. I'm kind of beneficiary of that through the OCR. I think that is already, I mean, very important when doing OCR, and also when reconstructing the puzzle of contents, right? For example, when we deal with newspapers and we want to have newspaper articles, we need to recompose, reassemble them. But also to make OCR engines work better, because we can apply different engines to different parts of a certain page that might have different properties, right? Different font, for example. So it's absolutely helpful, and people are also working on that. So it's yeah, it's great that they do it.
I see no other questions. So thank you again for your presentation and all the clear answers to the questions. It was really interesting. And I still don't see any new questions, so
okay.
We can stop the webinar now.
Absolutely. Well, let me also thank you everyone. Great questions, and I'm really glad that it was of use. And if you have any other questions, feel free to follow up via email, or I'm easily reachable online. Thanks again, Miriam, for sharing this.